Bueno, entonces, muy buenos días,
Very well, good morning.
señora Alicia Bárcena, secretaria
Alicia
ejecutiva de
Bárcena,
ECLAC,
Executive
señor
Secretary
Julio
of
Bardege,
ECLAC,
director regional
Julio
de la
Bardege,
Organización
the
de las
Regional
Naciones Unidas para
Director
la
of
Alimentación y la
the
Agricultura,
Food and
Bea
Agriculture Organization of the UN, Beatriz Arguimon Cedeira, Vice President of the
el
Republic of
señor
Uruguay,
Pedro Brolo,
and Mr.
ministro
Pedro
primero de
Brolo,
Relaciones
Minister of
Exteriores de la
Foreign
República
Affairs
de
of the
Guatemala.
Republic of Guatemala.
Señores y señoras ministros,
Ladies and
miembros
gentlemen,
de
ministers,
los
vice ministers,
representantes del
and
gobierno,
other representatives
organizaciones
of government
reproductoras de la
and
tierra
other
y
organizations from civil
nuestra
society,
audiencia en
producers, and
este
others who
evento.
are joining us
Hemos
for this
iniciado este
event.
evento que es
We are
un
opening
evento
this
organizado
event that has been
conjuntamente con la
organized
FAO,
in conjunction
FAO,
with
con la
the FAO,
colaboración de
ECLAC, with the
institutos,
collaboration
agencias,
of a
fondos y
group of
programas del
agencies,
sistema de
funds,
Naciones
and
Unidas de la
programs
región,
across the
FIDA,
region,
OIT, ONU Mujeres, Programa Mundial
UN
de
Women,
Alimentos, PNUD,
UN
PENUMA,
BD,
UNESCO.
PNUMA,
Este
UNESCO, and
espacio de
others.
diálogo
This opportunity for
en
dialogue
un
seeks to
contexto tan
identify in a
sensible y
context that
tan
is so sensitive
doloroso
and so
como la emergencia
challenging
sanitaria
as the
que estamos
healthcare
atravesando.
crisis that we are
De todas
going through.
maneras, queremos
In any
identificar
case, we
coincidencias
want to
en América
identify
Latina y el Caribe,
points of
similitudes
encounter,
en
of
las
dovetailing
prácticas
on best practices in
asistencialistas
Latin America and the
y que
Caribbean
busquemos
so that countries
dispositivos
can
que
have
puedan llevar
positive
su voz a la
support
cumbre mundial
mechanisms and
de
can
sistemas
take their
alimentarios,
voices together
convocada por el
to
secretario
the
general de las
summit
Naciones
convened
Unidas.
by the
A
Secretary General of the United
continuación,
Nations.
vamos a presentar cuatro
At this time,
sesiones
we will be
introductorias.
presenting four sessions: an
Una
opening
sesión sobre los diálogos
ceremony or session,
regionales,
a
otra sobre cooperación
conversation
regional y
about
finalmente
national
relaciones con
dialogues,
Mercosur.
one on
A
regional cooperation, and
continuación,
closing
iniciamos
remarks.
entonces
Let
con la
us now
sesión
begin
inaugural
with our
y
inauguration
cederemos la
session,
palabra en
and I
primer
would
lugar
give
a
the floor
nuestra secretaria
initially
ejecutiva
to
de
our
ECLAC,
Executive Secretary
Alicia
of
Bárcena.
ECLAC,
Por favor,
Alicia
tiene la palabra.
Barcena. Alicia, you have the floor. Thank you very much. I take advantage of this opportunity to greet you all and thank you all for the tremendous work that has been done with the UNDP, with the FAO, and others. I would particularly like to greet the Vice President of the Republic of Uruguay, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Guatemala, the Minister of Social Development and Family of the Republic of Chile, Renato Alvarado, Minister of Agriculture and Livestock of Costa Rica. Costa Rica also is chairing the session of ECLAC. Undersecretary of Bilateral Multilateral Economic Negotiations of Argentina, Edwin Freddy Mamani Machaca, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of Bolivia, and of course, note that it is a pleasure to have been able to come together in conjunction with Julio Bardege, the Regional Director for Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure for you to be able to join us at this meeting based on the need for inclusive systems to maintain our food systems with a view toward the summit that it was convened in started in 2019 as a result of the unprecedented impact, of course, of the pandemic, which has added to this process, particularly food security, which I assume that Julio will be speaking about based on the data and the regional reports that have been presented a few days ago. We've also sought to present to the countries and to society in general what has happened in the last year, year and a half after the onset of the pandemic. And what we are clear about is that there has been a central role of our systems at the regional level from our fields, and we're seeing the confinement, and this has made itself evident that we have tremendous issues. We've seen a drop in regional GDP of negative 6.9%. And for 2021, we've seen projections and we've seen that there's a paradox of recovery because in 2021, we will experience a growth rate of 5.2%. And so there is a certain bouncing back following the contraction of 2020, but it will not ensure sustainable growth because the environmental impact and the other structural problems in the region have not been resolved and rather have deepened. Also, by 2022, we will have positive growth of 2.2%. It is still a slowdown as compared to 2019, and it does not allow us to fully recover. And we certainly are seeing that this is a topic of concern. From the interpreter, sounded origin is very much wanting. There's also additional background noise. The interpreters will do their best, but we are not privy to the text being read at high speed. And again, with the deficiencies and audio, it is not possible to provide a reliable interpretation of Alicia Barcena's remarks.
Afectando fundamentalmente a las mujeres.
Women have been hardest hit, school children, the elderly. And in the region, we are seeing that we are not able to move forward also in investment. We've seen a considerable drop, and we've seen the lowest rate in 30 years, especially if we compare ourselves with the worldwide average and the regional averages. So we are far below them. And while countries have taken important fiscal policies and have taken measures of a broad array to overcome hunger, specifically in the region, they have been insufficient. As of July 30th, the country had seen very high rates of death due to COVID, including the highest death rate in the world. And we have tremendous asymmetries also in terms of the rate of vaccines. We can see that there are major gaps in the region as well. Chile has good levels, Uruguay, the Dominican Republic, and others, but some are in the lowest levels of the equation. And the asymmetries are not just within the region, but also with regard to the developed world, where we can see that the EU is at about 35% of their population vaccinated, 3 times more than ours, and North America is 4 times more than our region. So one of the major issues that we have repeated is access to vaccines in our region. The poverty rate reached just over 12%, 12.5%, with an increase of 22 million people, a number of poor and 8 million in extreme poverty. We saw large numbers and of investment, but nonetheless, we saw, again, despite the investment, these huge levels. If we had not had the investment and the direct transfers, we would have seen even higher levels of poverty. Poverty is associated with food insecurity. We've gone from 70 million in 2019 to 78 million. That if there had not been any support or transfers would have been 91 million. So therefore, these transfers clearly have supported millions of people across the region, over 40%. But the inequality in income distribution rose in our region to 12.9%. The other topic of deep concern is that the rural areas are also being hard hit because these are the ones that are most disconnected, and the rural poverty is 23% higher than others. Again, from the interpreter, sounded origin is extremely wanting. We are not privy to the text and do not have the statistics. It is simply not possible to provide a reliable rendition in these conditions. The interpreter is unable to continue at this time.
Seguridad alimentaria, ya nos hablará Julio sobre el asunto, moderada o grave, de acuerdo a lo que nosotros hemos planteado, alcanza 40% de la población, 6.5 puntos más que en 2019, o sea que hubo 44 millones de personas más entre 2019 y 2020 en inseguridad alimentaria moderada o grave, y 21 millones que pasaron a sufrir inseguridad grave. Entonces, si bien es cierto que el sector agropecuario en términos económicos ha mostrado mayor resiliencia frente a la caída de la actividad económica general, los datos preliminares para 16 países nos indican que el conjunto de las actividades agricultura, ganadería, caza y pesca tuvieron menor caída que el PIB total, al menos en 11 países. Y en el ámbito de consumo, las noticias son mucho menos alentadoras. El agregado regional, el índice de precios de los alimentos, ha crecido a tasas mucho mayores que el índice de precio de los otros bienes. Es decir, la inflación se manifiesta en la subida de los precios de los alimentos. Y las tasas de crecimiento han sido de 7,1 y 5,1% respectivamente. El aumento de la pobreza y del precio de los alimentos acentúa un problema que se ha venido agudizando en la región y que hemos denominado la doble carga de la malnutrición. Es un trabajo que hemos hecho con el Programa Mundial de Alimentos y es la ocurrencia simultánea de la desnutrición y el sobrepeso y la obesidad. En la CEPAL hemos desarrollado una metodología para estimar el costo económico de esta doble carga. La hemos aplicado en 8 países de la región y algunos resultados nos arrojan lo siguiente. El costo estimado de la doble carga de malnutrición en Chile, por ejemplo, es de 0,2%. En Chile hay más obesidad, ¿verdad?, que desnutrición. Hasta 10%, que esto ocurre en los países del Triángulo Norte, El Salvador, 10,3%, en Honduras 10,2%, en Guatemala 16,3%. Este es el costo de la doble malnutrición, obesidad y desnutrición, que es enorme. Y frente a este escenario, y sabemos que en Centroamérica el aumento de la inseguridad alimentaria es ahora alrededor de 8 millones de personas. Y entonces hemos planteado la necesidad urgente, sí, de conectar la emergencia con la recuperación y movernos hacia este planteamiento que nos hace la cumbre, este Food Summit, y la década de acción de la Agenda 2030, y construir un nuevo futuro. Tenemos que hacerlo a partir de la emergencia, porque no es que la emergencia se cierre y se hable de la recuperación. Es un continuo en donde la recuperación transformadora con igualdad y sostenibilidad ambiental es imprescindible. Para ello vamos a requerir reforzar el Estado de Derecho, fortalecer una democracia más participativa y sobre todo prevenir los conflictos sociales al mismo tiempo que vamos transformando la estructura productiva en línea con la Agenda 2030. Pero no podemos seguir haciendo lo mismo y esperar resultados distintos. Así es que, amigas y amigos, esta crisis nos crea un sentido de urgencia que debemos aprovechar para crear sistemas alimentarios más robustos, inclusivos, sostenibles y competitivos. Y para transitar a esa dirección, debemos aprovechar mejor nuestra riqueza en agrobiodiversidad, en diversidad de culturas, en conocimientos ancestrales. Nos va a acompañar más tarde Mirna Cunningham, nuestra querida representante de los pueblos indígenas. Necesitamos promover estilos de vida más saludables. Necesitamos potenciar nuestro rol como región proveedora de alimentos para el mundo, sin afectar nuestra biodiversidad y nuestros ecosistemas. Necesitamos también transitar hacia sistemas y prácticas de producción más agroecológicas y la aplicación de soluciones basadas en la naturaleza para combatir, por cierto, el cambio climático. Y debemos crear sinergias y complementariedades entre conocimientos ancestrales, conocimientos científicos modernos, entre tecnologías digitales, las tecnologías en el ámbito de las ciencias biológicas, entre la producción para exportar y la producción para consumir en nuestros mercados locales, entre el comercio global y el comercio intrarregional, para mencionar algunos ejemplos. Nuestra región tiene enormes capacidades.
Again, from the interpreter, sound at origin is wanting and is insufficient to provide a full, complete, and reliable interpretation. When conditions improve, interpretation will resume.
El Programa Mundial de Alimentos, el FIDA, Bueno, todas, somos 19, casi 20 agencias, 11 programas en la región que trabajamos de la mano y por lo tanto les deseo mucho éxito en esta consulta, en esta reunión y muchísimas gracias por su atención y su participación.
Muchas gracias, Alicia.
Thank you, Alicia. Thank you so much for your remarks. Now let us continue with Julio Bardege, the Regional Director of the FAO. Julio, the floor is yours.
Muchísimas gracias, Janet.
Thank you very much, Jeanette. I would like to begin by thanking the Executive Secretary of ECLAC, our dear friend Alicia Bárcena, for leading this dialogue, this regional dialogue within the UN Food Systems Summit convened by the General Secretary, the Secretary General of the UN. Now, it is fascinating to see how we have all followed suit behind the Secretary General. Today, thus far, 37 independent dialogues have been carried out throughout Latin America and 58 national dialogues, 58 national dialogues. Today, in fact, this morning, I was taking part in the closing remarks or the closing session of the Bolivian experience where they had 9 separate sector and territory level dialogue. So thousands of individuals representing a variety of different sectors, consumer sector, producers, individuals working in the environmental field, the scientific community, all of these individuals, we have all been reflecting over the last few months, weeks, and days upon the meaning of the food systems in our contemporary world today and what these food systems actually represent for the future. Now, I can say, without fear of misspeaking, that we cannot have sustainable development if we are unable to transform, revisit, rethink our agri-food systems. Now, if we take a look at the targets and indicators related to the SDGs, 1 out of 5 of these will be able to be attained in the rural sector with rural sector stakeholders. And 2/3 of these, in fact, call for the participation of the rural realm and all of the players within the agri-food system. So this is not just discourse, this is a reality. We will not have sustainable development unless we are able to truly transform the agri-food systems. Now, having said that, we will be beginning the Food Systems Summit soon at a point in time in which the world at large has been facing this overwhelming scourge that has impacted the agri-food system. I don't know how else to put this. In just 1 year, 110 million individuals are facing hunger, not food insecurity, but hunger. And hunger is a situation in which the individuals do not even have enough caloric intake to move forward with a semi-healthy life. And almost 800 million individuals in the last year are facing that situation. 20% increase in a year's time. This is something unprecedented. We have never before seen this in Latin America and the Caribbean. 60 million individuals live with hunger. 6 million boys and girls suffer from chronic malnutrition, and this is a significant increase when compared to last year's figures. Now, what does all of this mean? This means that we have faced a 25-year setback with regard to our struggle and our fight against hunger. We are once again situated in the 80s. And I'm not referring to any old 25 years because these were actually the best years that we have experienced on our continent in terms of doing away with hunger. So we are truly facing a food crisis in our region. One example of this is hunger, and then we have a variety of different forms of malnutrition, and all of this coexist. We have 12 million people, as I mentioned, facing hunger, and this is an overall general issue that's not just in terms of malnutrition, but we have obesity and many people who are overweight. 1 out of 4 adults in our region, in fact, are obese. 1 out of 4 adults. Now, if we go all the way back to the advent of time,
Esta ecuación entre alimentación
food
y salud.
had the equation between food has been equated with health, but is no longer like that. And we need to transform our food systems in order to eradicate hunger, but also to get back to that healthy equation, the healthy balance between food and nutrition. We know that our food systems are closely tied to agricultural systems, rural systems, the climate, all of the farmers, they all know this. They're fully aware of this on a daily basis. This is made patently clear to them. We know this. And there is no other sector within our economy that is as dependent and has such an impact on the planet's health. Things simply are not well today. Agriculture and agri-food systems, will they continue to be, those that will continue to be around in 20, 30, 40 years will be those that are environmentally sustainable. We know that we have less and less space for farming, for producing in a sustainable way. And as a result, sustainability is at the heart of all of this. The farmers are aware of the fact that they face greater water scarcity on a daily basis. They know that the plant and animal disease cycles are changing. They change with the climate change aspects. And in the Caribbean, we know that the hurricanes are destroying their crops. And in Central America, we know that drought and flooding are also drastically impacting their lifestyles. And we know that 640 million people in this region obviously rely on the agri-food system. In some countries, 30 to 40% of the country's GDP corresponds to the farm to the table relationship. So there is no possible way to overcome or to begin the post-COVID period without transforming and renewing the agri-food system. This will call for a great deal of investment, public investment, but primarily private investment. And we know that our agri-food systems represent a significant investment and wealth. That's one aspect, but let's not forget that half of the rural population in Latin America and the Caribbean live in poverty, as we just recently heard from ECLAC, and we've seen in the ECLAC's Outlook document. And we know that in the 21st century, this is the current situation regarding hunger. Now, can we actually talk about a modern agri-food system that's dynamic when this is a social reality, social context? Now, for all of those individuals who are trying to support the 2030 agenda and placing this at the heart of the of what we do, we need to ensure that this is at the heart of the agri-food transformation system. We need to make these systems more efficient, more inclusive, more resilient, and more sustainable so that we can have better production, better nutrition, a better environment, and a better life for all of us, leaving no one behind. That is why we are here holding these food systems summit. And once again, I would like to thank all of my friends and colleagues from the UN system and the national governments and the other sectors present here from society. So thank you once again to all of you, and thank you, Alicia and Jeanette. Thank you, Julio. Now, apparently, we have a technical issue, and the Vice President of the Republic of Uruguay is facing has experienced some technical difficulties. So we will move on to the next speaker, the Minister of Foreign Affairs from the Republic of Guatemala, His Excellency Pedro Brolo. Good morning.
It is a pleasure to be here at this event entitled Identifying Common Ground Toward the Summit in Latin America and the Caribbean. I thank the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean and the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations for inviting me to this event, which will provide tremendous results throughout the region. Let me take advantage of this opportunity to emphasize that Guatemala was a pioneer for the region development of a series of actions agreed upon within the framework of the Food System Summit as a clear work path. It carried out a national and international strategy that involved the development of 3 national dialogues, as well as the follow-up of the agenda of an axis of action that in safe and secure food for all. This effort was carried out in conjunction with the national strategy for the Great Crusade for National Nutrition, which seeks to unite all sectors with comprehensive actions that contribute directly to our population, strengthening the fulfillment of the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly SDG 1, the end of poverty, and SDG 2, zero hunger, SDG 3, health and well-being, as well as number 10, reducing inequalities, and SDG 12, the responsible production and consumption. During this process, we have the participation of public institutions associated with the issues of agriculture, food security, and nutrition, the environment, social development, education, health, international organizations, the private sector associated with crops, fisheries, agriculture, livestock, forestry, trade, food industry, as well as academia, civil society, indigenous peoples, and women's organizations. All of them form part of the food system. The sectors and the stakeholders have highlighted in their participation during the national dialogues the importance of promoting sustainable strategies in partnership between sectors for institutional strengthening to ensure access, consumption, and distribution of food for all. This can be done by building a path forward that addresses social protection programs, but also builds capacities and capabilities to produce healthy food and to define local and regional marketing lines of action. Another important element that emerged from the discussion was the promotion of spaces for dialogue at the community level for decision making to ensure the sustainability of food systems, as well as the promotion of education and nutrition in the communities. Guatemala has not been left behind, and that is why we have also joined the initiative of the World Food Program and the government of Finland, entitled International School for Food Coalition, which seeks to promote actions and share knowledge that will allow nutritious school meals to be made available to children around the world by 2030. Thus serving as a key tool both for the recovery of the pandemic as well as the achievement of the SDGs. In turn, we are also part of the efforts that have been undertaken by the Central American integration system in the search for joint strategies to reduce the vulnerabilities that affect the region, linking together all the members of that system. In this context, in June of this year, a dialogue was held at the regional level, which sought to identify robust, sustainable, and resilient local systems in education and exchange of experiences, the rapprochement between producers and consumers, as well as the conservation of traditional practices. This is a wonderful opportunity for us at the regional level to make progress in our political commitments and to address the challenges of malnutrition, hunger, and food insecurity by undertaking initiatives and seeking to ensure financial and social sustainability. Undertaking regional initiatives that include regional food security, strengthening agricultural programs, including promoting the supply of basic products that ensure the full satisfaction of the needs of the population. and also strengthening regulations that ensure quality rather, weight measurement, as well as the biological, toxicological, and nutritional protection of food. I am confident that this event will serve as an opportunity for us all to work together to generate substantive measures as well as measurable progress in food systems and the achievement of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. A sustainable food system is one that ensures food and nutritional security for all, being responsible to the economic, social, and environmental foundations for future generations. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We appreciate the remarks of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Guatemala. On that note, we will conclude our inaugural session, and we will now turn to our first substantive session on national dialogues. In the course of this session, we will have the moderation of Julio Bardege, Regional Director of the FAO. Julio, the floor is yours for this session. And again, this is slated for a 50-minute period. Thank you very much, Jeanette. Thank you to all of the participants in this session for this regional dialogue. During this session, we would endeavor to summarize to a certain extent the national dialogues that have taken place, that have occurred in the vast majority of the countries in our region, as well as in dozens of countries around the globe. We are seeking to identify what the core topics have been that have been identified and for which a priority has been set by countries through this national consultation process. Toward this effect, we have a panel of distinguished representatives with us, including Carlos Rubilar, the Minister of Social Development and Family of the Republic of Chile, Renato Alvarado, Minister of Agriculture and Livestock of the Republic of Costa Rica, Ambassador Carola Ramon Beirano, Undersecretary of Bilateral and Multilateral Economic Negotiations of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, International Trade and Worship of the Republic of Argentina, Mr. Freddy Mamani Machaca, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Plurinational State of Bolivia, and Mr. Nani Mendoza, Vice Minister of Rural Development of the Republic of Ecuador. The format of this panel will be 2 rounds of questions that we have posed to our panelists. And I would therefore like to begin with the first question, which is one that we have asked all of them to endeavor to answer, and that is, what is the core message emanating out of the national dialogue in your country with a view toward the upcoming summit? I would like to highlight this and start, if we might, with the Minister of Agriculture, Livestock of Costa Rica, Renato Alvarado. Minister, you have the floor. Thank you very much, and good morning to all. It is a pleasure to be here at this very important forum for agriculture in the Americas. Costa Rica held 3 dialogues and this meant ensuring access, improving sustainable production, and then a 4th dialogue that will be held is one on digitalization of information. We have brought together our information and would like to highlight important topics such as the need for modern, updated, technically advanced agriculture with innovation and abilities to develop family agriculture. We have a tradition of small-scale farming that has fostered our economic development. We have some 31 producers of coffee in Costa Rica and a large number of producers who engage in subsistence farming. And the interpreter's again, sound at origin is wanting. It is very low and choppy. We will do our best. There is a call to share information and to create greater associations. We've identified issues in family farming, especially in the area of finance. We have faced issues because banks tend to use risk as a primary financial condition for evaluation, and therefore we've found that our farmers need adjustments to be made in those criteria so that they can qualify for credit. Toward that end, we have sought to institute micro lending and other financial instruments to facilitate their work. And why are we noting this as an important aspect? Well, because unless we can support our small-scale family-based farming, we will not be able to be effective in our efforts to ensure sustainable, safe food products in our fields. Nor will we be able to successfully roll over our traditional farming techniques into more modern, technologically oriented techniques. And to stem the flow of rural-urban migration that we're currently experiencing as young people seek other forms of employment and sustenance other than, again, these small-scale farming techniques. We've also seen a need to
de tener 4,000 extensionistas hace unos años atrás a tener 377 extensionistas.
We have seen a tremendous change in the number
pequeños, medianos productores, lo que hace una imposibilidad material de atenderlos de manera adecuada.
We've seen this upsurge in these numbers of extension officers, and the only way that we are able to do this is through added technology in these extension officers to be able to engage in this form of outreach and to do so with greater technological support. Another aspect that is important is opportunities for direct sales from farmers to consumers, from farm to table, to ensure that we are eliminating middlemen who serve limited to no purpose. In that regard, We are seeking to ensure, again, that our producers have good opportunities, fair prices, fair means of marketing their goods. And to do that, we need to make changes as well as reducing chemicals and increase the amount of organic fertilizer to be able to sustain the sustainability of our products. Thank you very much, Minister Alvarado. It's been very clear, and I'm sure that many of these remarks, of course, are shared by other ministries. I will now recognize Carla Rubilar, the Minister of Social Development and Family of Chile. Minister, please note that you have 4 minutes to summarize the results of your national dialogues. Minister?
Thank you very much, Julio. I would like to begin this by thanking the entire UN family system, the ECLAC-FAO. Thank you for supporting the public policies that we have been drafting and developing within the ministry. I would like to greet all with you, extend you a very warm welcome, but specifically to Alicia Bárcena, the Executive Secretary of ECLAC, and of course you, Julio, of course our Regional Director of FAO for Latin America and the Caribbean, all the various ministers and vice ministers present today. We know that health and the well-being of our people is at the heart of development. Without access to this, and this is what we have mentioned during the dialogues, without access to healthy diets, we will not have progress, we will not have justice. And we know that the agri-food systems are the key way to address poverty and inequality. That's why it's very important for food and nutrition policies to be framed within social protection systems that include the participation, that include the participation of all stakeholders along the value chain, farmers, people at the fairs, academia, civil society, the agri-food business, families, etc. Now, the fact that the Secretariat that is focusing on nutrition is within the Ministry of Social Development and the Family, we are honored here. It's key that they are addressing nutrition as a social aspect and under the human approach. And we know that behind poor nutrition, there are stories of injustice and survival. Often this involves a lack of access to the right quantity and quality of food. And that is why we have taken on the national leadership of this within the UN Food System Summit. And we are committed to listening to the various stakeholders in the food system in order to draft a national plan that will include the territories, the social organizations, indigenous communities, civil society. For example, we have held 17 national dialogues and subnational dialogues throughout the entire country, becoming familiar with the experiences and seeking solutions that will allow us to transform our food system so that we can have a more relevant approach that is focused on gender, that is multicultural and multi-territorial. This has been a key opportunity for us as a ministry, because we know that nutrition, food, these are part of our social protection networks, and we are fully aware of how the SDGs play into this. It's even more important to mention that we believe that dialogue allows us to listen to each other and to find solutions and agreements that will allow Chile to be a more equitable, fairer society. Now, this dialogue has focused on the various difficulties, making access to healthy food a challenge. We know that inequality is key here. We also know that there are other variables such as income and the environment, and we also understand that it's necessary to promote other initiatives such as helping out small farmers, local consumption and production, and self-sustainable production. Now, we also have included the various life stages, and we are focusing on the the indigenous peoples and their cultural traditions regarding food. Now, the COVID pandemic has an impact on individuals' lives across the board, including food and nutrition. And we know that that COVID has had a greater impact on the more vulnerable countries, bringing about more inequality, calling on us to take more profound, relevant steps. The pandemic has affected hunger and nutrition And if we work together, we will be able to truly transform the food systems and reduce the inequalities that our populations face. That is why we will not stop working on implementing the food security plan and making progress toward sustainable, healthy diets for our people.
2 años de pandemia y todavía no aprendo a manejar el
Well,
aparato.
I still haven't figured out how to work my microphone despite the year-long experience. Thank you so much for that message. I think that message is key for all of the countries. And we have seen that even the higher income countries in the region continue to face challenges regarding food, health, and nutrition. Thank you for that. So let us move on with our next panel member. Allow me to give the floor to Carola Ramon Berjano, the Undersecretary of Bilateral and Multilateral Economic Negotiations at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, International Trade and Worship of the Republic of Argentina. Thank you very much for that. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to specifically thank Alicia Bárcena and you, Julio Bardege, for organizing this event. It is so crucial and allows us to identify the various common points, common ground that we face with regard to towards the Food System Summit. We know that agri-food systems are particularly important in Argentina, obviously, and for the entire region. We know that we are the #1 exporter of healthy, nutritional food and providers of ecosystem products. Now, Argentina has played a very productive, active role since the early stages, preparatory stages of the Food System Summit. We understand the importance that our country plays in this regard. We are part of the Advisory Council, and we are also involved in Action Track #2. And we have also submitted 3 draft change solutions, one for sustainable development and 2 others related to the bioeconomy. Now, through our Minister of Foreign Affairs, we have held 3 national dialogues with widespread participation by the various stakeholders, including producers, civil society organizations, and we also organized these events in keeping with the following topics. One was the future of the Argentinian agri-food system, opportunities and challenges of said system, practices and experiences with regard to sustainable development, and sustainable food systems for healthy diets. Now, our region has a great deal to show the world with regard to best practices. And we would like to emphasize that we do not see that there's a single solution for all the various agri-food systems, but rather the solution will truly depend on the local priorities and context. We understand that we need to continue enhancing and improving our food systems. They need to continue being a significant source of employment and income, while at the same time, they need to help ameliorate the situation regarding hunger. We know that the region has played a key role with regard to advancing towards the achievement of the SDGs and the 2030 Agenda. We also agree that it is necessary to have sustainable agri-food systems that are based on a fair transition that involve national and local priorities. Now, obviously, under the understanding that not all the agri-food systems need to be transformed, because in fact, some cases, they just simply need to be enhanced without radical changes. We know that in some cases, a radical change would entail a significant effort and significant resources that can be used elsewhere, particularly given the situation we all face regarding the need to recover post-pandemic. Thank you for that. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you for those reflections and comments regarding the Argentinian experience relative to the national dialogues. Thank you for that. I actually agree. I think we need to recognize that agri-food system transformations must always abide by the national capacities and context. And we know that there's not a one-size-fits-all solution, given the wide range of agri-food systems in our region and across the globe. So let us continue with the next speaker, We will be hearing from Hernani Mendoza, the Vice Minister of Rural Development from the Republic of Ecuador. Vice Minister, you have 4 minutes, please. Thank you. Very kind of you. Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank Alicia and Julio for allowing me to speak here today and greet the various authorities from the region, ministers, vice ministers. I'm sure we face a variety of similar situations. Ecuador is a small country, though, and well, we agree with many of the comments you have said thus far, and our context can be similar. And in fact, on May 20th, we actually participated in our national dialogue, and there were roughly 430 participants involved in this national dialogue. We involved all the stakeholders, small, medium, large producers, farmers, private sector. We know that the private sector can play a key role in transforming the agri-food system. We know that the private sector constitutes the consumers, the purchasers, those who are acquiring products on the production chain. And we work very closely with our rural and peasant farmers as well. We are doing that in order to do away with the middleman, if possible, and trying to ensure that we have closer ties between consumers and producers. In this regard, we are working on 3 key actions. 1, ensuring access to safe, nutritional food for all, changing these consumption patterns so that they're more sustainable, also fostering positive production, that is a nature positive production. And this involves actually an Amazon region project that focuses on enhancing coffee, cacao, palm oil, and livestock. Those are key agri food businesses in the Amazon. And so we are also doing this while keeping a check on deforestation. And we are also fostering resilience regarding vulnerabilities, shocks, and stress. We know that small farmers also have the right to have the legal rights to their land, and this would allow them to have access to credit, 30-year credit, for example, at low interest rates, so that they can be more productive, so they can have a more technified farming experience and more participatory. And that essentially is what we are doing, what we have been doing thus far. We have the Pro-Amazon program, for example. We are fostering sustainable production systems based on the chain approach, and the program has spearheaded a variety of different actions related to the innovation and development of the agricultural livestock system, focusing on palm products, coffee, cacao, and livestock. Now we are working in the rural sector as well with regard to stockpiling the coffee and cacao products. We're trying to provide free services and boost this entire sector to prevent the drain of individuals from the rural sector to the urban sector. We have several pilot programs related to sustainable food systems, anti-deforestation or reforestation. We're working with the various international and national actors in this realm. And in order to secure this, we have reached a variety of different agreements with the farmers and producer associations, fair associations. You have 1 minute left. Next Thursday, in fact, we will be holding our second national dialogue, and we are very happy to state that we will most likely be doubling the number of the participants. So thank you very much for that. Thank you for that, Ecuador. Thank you for sharing your experience with us and the achievements you have made thus far. We wish you the best of luck in your upcoming processes. I have been informed that the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of Bolivia has not yet completed the national dialogue that he is actually presiding over right now. They are closing that event. In fact, he led the event, and now it is his turn to close the event. So we will have to omit Bolivia's presentation in this part. Distinguished Minister, your mic is open. Thank you. Let us move on with the second session. And we have actually come up with some very specific questions for the various countries. I'm not sure if Minister Rubilar is here. I was told that she had a prior engagement. I'm not sure if she is still online with us. If she is not, then let us move on with the specific question that we have prepared for Argentina. This is related to the commercial and economic aspects of agri-food systems. As we mentioned, these are key components of economic development in all of our countries, in fact. And in Argentina, specifically, we'd like to hear from you with regard to the conclusions of your national dialogue, and specifically those conclusions related to the trade of agri-food products at the global level, of course, and at the interregional level as well. Distinguished Ambassador, what do you have to say?
Thank you very much. As I was saying previously, the promotion of sustainable food systems are of the utmost importance to us, and we are cognizant also that they assist in securing not just SDG 2 on reducing hunger, but also other SDGs associated with the struggle against poverty, the availability of decent work, and sustainable consumption, among others. And I'd like to note that in Argentina, the food systems in our have also emanated out of our national dialogues, and they are composed by a variety of players, including small-scale producers, family-based producers, as well as our large-scale corporate producers. All of this enables us to be producers of high-quality, safe, nutritious food. Our commitment is to continue to produce foodstuffs of this nature in a sustainable fashion, particularly respecting the balance of these three pillars of sustainability to contribute to ending poverty, hunger, securing better income distribution, the sustainable use of resources, and national development, leaving no one behind. In this context, we are convinced that, as we've said previously, some of these topics we do not need radical change, just improvements. We're also convinced that food production and livestock are part of the solution, not part of the problem. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador. Let me now recognize the Minister of Agriculture Livestock of Costa Rica, Renato Alvarado. As we all know, Costa Rica is an example that we look to whenever we speak of sustainable development or environment. Costa Rica is always the country that we look to first in these conversations. And we know that they are making an outstanding effort so that all of their agro-food systems can have that same national view and approach that we are all so proud of here in Latin America. So, Minister, I'd like to ask you if you could please delve into greater depth of these environmental aspects of this process of transformation of our agri-food systems. Thank you very much. I would like to be, again, brief, given time constraints. We have engaged in practices and environmental actions. We understand that the disconnect between people and producers should not exist. Rather, we should incorporate sustainable practices for production. And we've developed our food and livestock systems where we have now 1,000 farms engaging in technological changes, electrical fences, and others, including the use of solar energy for these fences, using wind power for pumping, and as well as for our drip irrigation systems. Again, trying to make use of technology, also moving toward bioconsumables in two basins specifically, where we've been able to recover the watershed and to bolster production for food and livestock producers in the basin and around it, even in areas that have been traditionally deforested or had been lands that had been stripped of the natural tree covering. We've been able to replant and improve the quality of our grasses in these areas so that we can take advantage of opportunities for greater shade for the animals, again, with a vision toward offsetting and mitigating the effects of climate change on our lands. We're also seeking to significantly reduce the use of harmful chemicals, moving toward bio-friendly mechanisms, organic fertilizers, and other mechanisms to reduce the trace elements in our soils. Toward that end, we have sought to educate our producers, our farmers, and to bolster their understanding of healthy processes, procedures, and modern techniques, with a view toward, again, moving away from agricultural chemical traditions, because not only are these chemicals harmful to nature, to people, but also it does not reflect the tradition and the history of our people, and has been and these efforts are all with a view of, again, maintaining and recovering our soils. Again, from the interpreter sound that our origin was wanting, we've done our best. Thank you, Minister. We have really enjoyed those remarks. Let me now turn over the floor to the Vice Minister of Ecuador for the second question. And I now see that the Vice Minister of Bolivia is with us. So we will ask him then to wrap up the panel following the remarks of the Vice Minister of Ecuador. Minister Mendoza, I believe we all understand and we're clear that these processes of transformation or improvement to agri-food systems will require tremendous efforts in innovation. We're not talking about things that any of us can do without a major effort. What can you tell us about what's emanated out of your national dialogues on this topic of innovation? We believe that in Latin America, unfortunately, for the last 10 or 15 years, we've seen a reduction in investments in science and technology for agro-food systems and major changes toward large multinational companies, many of them that lead scientific and technological processes, and we've sort of ceded a lot of ground to them. So, Vice Minister, what has been happening in your country? What is your tack? And tell us what's happening in Ecuador, and then we'll turn the floor over to Bolivia. Thank you. In the area of innovation in Ecuador, the hot topic is irrigation. Irrigation at the small, mid, and large scale level. This has really enabled us to improve margins, reducing costs for our producers. That's one thing. A risk is, of course, important, reducing that risk for our producers. Second, traceability for our middlemen. And this is really the battling point for us is traceability, risk reduction. So these are the two major things that have emanated out of our national dialogues. Thank you. And the topic of water, of course, is clear and is very important. I believe that we are all cognizant that we have to make radical changes in this. And Ambassador, I think we really need to focus on the efficient use of water, of that technified irrigation. And Argentina in recent years, for example, has seen horrible droughts. Chile has been 10, 15 years in a continuous drought, very tough conditions there. So many countries, I would believe, Minister, would share your view on that. So I am very pleased to welcome to our panel the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of the plurinational state of Bolivia, Edwin Freddy Mamani. I know that you've just been wrapping up a very successful national dialogue, but Vice Minister, you can have 6-7 minutes. Perhaps we'll bring together the two sets of remarks and give you the floor. Thank you very much, Julio, for this opportunity to speak on this occasion. And Julio, of course, has joined us in the conclusion of this dialogue and this process of our national dialogue, both yesterday and today. This is something that we've done following 5 coordination meetings to address this topic, and 8 sectoral dialogues and intersectoral dialogues that have been held in Bolivia with the participation of a broad array of players. And this includes, of course, our indigenous peoples, our producers, academia, experts, small-scale producers, and as I said, a vast array of participants. And in that regard, let me share with you some of the substantive conclusions. Of course, Bolivia does place an accent on our traditional techniques that are organic and sustainable, and particularly those undertaken by our vulnerable population. Of course, we've suffered from tremendous pressures and to make changes, and nonetheless, Bolivia believes that it is of tremendous urgency to revalue and to reassess and to reappreciate the traditional means of production and to eschew the so-called more modern techniques for farming. This will contribute to health, well-being, and nutrition of all Bolivians due to productive diversification of foodstuffs produced in keeping with standards that are in favor of the environment. Again, this is a long-standing tradition in our country, but that has been losing space to other forms of production. We need to highlight them, recover these traditional means of production locally and nationally, and bring to an end the homogeneity in foodstuff production, and ensure that we have nutritional and nutritive food that we are being produced. We can see, second, that the productive areas and the traditional practices of the different original peoples, our intercultural approaches need to be highlighted, rescued, and supported, as well as the traditions and spiritual aspects that have to do with food production, because it has to do with the well-being of men, women, and children across the country. That is to say, having a food identity as a means of overcoming poverty. This will also help to contribute to resilience to climate change, pandemics, and other issues, because of our association and our familiarity with Mother Earth, providing for diversification of production, distribution. Again, all of this will contribute to resilience, as we've seen in our traditional food production in Bolivia, which is characterized by grappling effectively with climate, with the high altitude, with drought, and done so much better than agro-industry. We continue to develop mechanisms. Again, this is just one example that needs to be taken into consideration, as well as the benefits of environmental resiliency. Lastly, we need to ensure that we are using our knowledge and native understanding of the soil and our native seeds. We have a seed bank of native seeds that will certainly contribute to food security and income biodiversity based on traditional knowledge and understanding of intercultural and sectoral understandings and traditional knowledge. We have said that many of our countries have large numbers of indigenous people and rural residents who provide sustenance for other sectors such as construction and mining and others. We also know that the social and economic impacts of the COVID-19 crisis have hit hardest our rural and poor sectors, and has affected individuals that are associated with small scale traditional farming techniques, many people who returned to their places of origin, to this migration from the city back to rural areas to produce foodstuffs because of the lack of employment opportunities in our cities. We should also note that these foodstuffs are the basis of sustainable nutrition and contribute to resilience and adaptation, again, to climate change, as noted previously, as well as sustainable use of native agrobiodiversity, the progressive use of our traditional means. Fourthly, agro production and traditional means is the core and the foundation for responsible production for our people and for Mother Earth, and is the future of our cities and our rural areas. Fifth, we've identified that traditional indigenous small-scale food production should be recognized in their variety and based on science in the context of knowledge dialogues and other forms of knowledge. We also, and to conclude, we need to expand the catalog of systems of production for traditional foodstuffs that are duly supported by research on their benefits, how they are best produced, and the impact that these improvements can have on economic well-being. Again, this is important for all of our states. We have our international year of the potato, that of quinoa, and that of other substances and foodstuffs. That is our agricultural calendar. Again, this has been supported by the UN, and these are fundamental foodstuffs that form part of the traditional foods that we have in country. We also need, of course, to open up to other markets to export our traditional products and create intergenerational understanding, as well as technical support through the UN to support our productive systems, again, of our traditional foodstuffs within the context of budgetary and jurisdictional restrictions and limitations in the context of living well. In this context, we need to support the socioeconomic elements of our country, the right to food. And so basically today
we have concluded this process with a country proposal that will be submitted to the summit that will be held in Rome on the 26th and 27th. And we have also concluded with a political statement, and we are also drafting the final parts of the national pathways for attaining the 2030 agenda. So thank you so much for allowing me to speak here and allowing me to convey to you the entire proposal of the small farmers, the peasant, rural, indigenous farmers, the SMEs, and without, of course, ruling out the agricultural companies and have to have a social, cultural, environmental approach. This is one of the key conclusions of the national dialogue process that we have carried out and concluded today. So thank you once again, dear Julio, for allowing us to take part in this event and share with you the experience that we have had with our national dialogue. Thank you so much for that. Minister, it's a pleasure and honor to have you with us here today. I am also very pleased that we have concluded this session with your remarks, because I think they actually emphasize the diversity of the agri-food systems that we have in our region. If we look around the various landscapes throughout the LAC region, we are aware of the wealth of beauty and diversity, and the agri-food systems clearly play a key role, not just for our region, but for the world at large. So many thanks to all of the panelists for their participation. And now I would like to give the floor to my dear friend, Jeanette Sanchez, so that we may move on to the next session of this UN Food Summit Systems regional dialogue. Thank you. Jeanette, your microphone is muted.
Ahí estoy, perdón.
There we go. I apologize for that. Thank you, Julio, once again. It seems as though we have been Swiss in terms of our ability to meet the schedule. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. We have heard about the wealth of interest in this topic, the various opportunities and potential, and the experience regarding the national dialogue. So thank you for that. Now let us move on to the next session, where we will hear about the opportunities and possibilities regarding regional cooperation as a way to meet many of these demands. Let us refer to the various opportunities that will be outlined by a variety of different institutions, programs, agencies that are working in the various areas related to agri-food systems. We have a panel of 6 speakers with us today. First of all, Jesus Quintana, the Director Manager for the Americas of the Biodiversity International from SEAT Alliance. We have Myrna Cunningham, the President of the Board of Directors of the Fund for the Development of Indigenous Peoples of Latin America and the Caribbean, FILAC. Juan Rivera from the National Institute of Public Health of Mexico. He has prepared a video for us. And then we will hear from Leticia Teleguario, a senior specialist for interagency, public and corporate alliances from UN Women, and Jessica Jacob, the regional manager of the Green Climate Fund. as well as Efrain Quicaña, a regional specialist in rural economy from the ILO. Each panelist will have no more than 7 minutes to make their remarks. Let us begin with Jesus Quintana. We have prepared a question for you as a segue, and this will also allow us to at least identify 3 priority areas where you believe we could enhance cooperation to ensure more resilient, sustainable food systems. In this regard, I would like to request that you identify the role of your organization relative to this comment and the opportunities and potential that you have to strengthen the cooperation within the UN system from your perspective. Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes, we can. Thank you, Jeanette. Thank you for moderating this event and for inviting us to take part in this quite relevant panel to refer to regional cooperation and how we can contribute to having more resilient food systems in the region. I would like to thank the Executive Secretary of ECLAC, Alicia Bárcena, and the Regional Director of FAO for Latin America and the Caribbean, Julio Bardege, members of the ministers from Uruguay, Argentina, Chile, for example, and others, and everyone else from the UN family. I think this is a fantastic opportunity for all of us here today on the eve of the summit to sit down and refer to these aspects. We know that there was a summit back in '96, then again in 2008 when we referred to the food price crisis, and once again we were referring to key relevant issues. For example, how do we eat and how do our food systems have an impact on our nutrition? I also believe that we have heard some fabulous keynote presentations that have once again shown us how the pandemic has truly affected inequality, hunger rates, malnutrition, and we know that, of course, we are facing other challenges related to food, nutrition, agriculture, climate change, resource depletion, as I mentioned, higher rates in terms of malnutrition and hunger. And what can we do about all of this? This is what Jeanette is asking us to refer to. What can we do together? Because the challenges are overwhelming and we need to boost resilience and food sustainability. I think we can do this. It will not be easy. We must not kid ourselves, but at the same time, we do have each other's back. Now, we know that the Biodiversity International is part of an alliance of the scientific and technological partners, and we work with most of the partners present here today from the international sector, the agricultural sector, the various ministries, and we work together providing data, science, and research, and that will allow us to, as input into the decision-making process so that we can have more robust outcomes for all. Just obviously, we know that the challenges continue to grow, and so we must not rest on our laurels. We must do more. And of course, when we see that the challenges increase, we must increase our efforts. Better research, for example, better science, number one. Secondly, better and more alliances, because we cannot do this alone. And thirdly, more resources. Now, with regard to the first aspect, we must conduct more research. We must be more efficient and poignant and emphasize effective research. We need to work on studies that bring us to more creative, innovative solutions, different approaches, different solutions. It's not just about boosting our national research centers, which thus far have provided fabulous results, but we need to do more. We need more investigation, we need more research, we need more support, we need to together foster more technology. Of course, this includes working with the UN system and the governments, because there are a wealth of actors out there, and FAO, ECLAC, etc. We are all out there working together, and we need to find solutions together so that we can scale up the technology available so that we can ensure better transformation of the agri-food systems. Number two, we also must provide support for more robust, efficient policies. And to do that, not only must we provide support and advise the governments, but we also need to provide them with data. Information is an essential part of having effective public policies. Without that, we will not have effective public policies. And transparency is key as well. And we are here to work toward better monitoring, better follow-up, better information, geospatial, georeference, more traditional data. And we need to pull all these data together for the benefit of the governments and ensure that the governments also share information with us for the benefit of better policies and for the benefit of the people. And as you mentioned, Jeanette, I'm supposed to refer to 3 key areas. So I think if we have better policies, better innovation, we will have also better investment. We need more resources because the solutions we have today are not sufficient. We have several pilot programs underway. We're all involved in that, and we need to ensure that we have more efficient investments. We need new models, new metrics, new ways to measure, because the investors and our quote unquote partners, private sector donors, what you want to call them, investment funds, impact funds, all of these parties will want to know where the results lie, where the outcomes are proving effective. And we need to share the results with each other so that together we can work towards technologies that are well designed and that can be adapted and used by all and replicated and multiplied, not just by those who are more fortunate, by those who are less fortunate as well. And this will allow us to advance towards the achievement of the SDGs and the 2030 agenda. That is our guiding light, without a doubt. And once again, I know I'm running out of time, but Jeanette, I would like to mention that we need to have a clear idea as to where we're headed. And I think this is a fantastic opportunity. And we are here to, well, we have to skirt bureaucracy, but nonetheless, this is what's important. It's not just the SDGs, but it's also important to bear in mind what we're eating, how we're feeding our families, the impact that the agri-food systems have on us, and the various vulnerabilities that we face. Finally, I would like to mention that this needs to be carried out with passion and rigor. That is key, but we must also have an approach that allows us to bring about change. We must be transparent and willing to share. Thank you so much for that.
I believe our chair is muted. Thank you very much, Jesus. You've given us a very important food for thought, literally, as well as positive energy, which is also important, and the opportunity to improve the tangible and intangible resources that the different agencies, programs, and institutions, not only within the UN system, but also outside the system, have in hand to channel resources to the countries in these times of need. So I would not now like to turn to Mirna Cunningham, President of the Board of Directors of FELAC, so that she can talk about the 3 priorities that FELAC has with a view toward the UN Summit on Food, and particularly in the context of indigenous peoples and family farming. We are interested in hearing about opportunities for cooperation with the UN system, not just at the summit, but also in a post-summit world, and for you to identify priorities. Mirna, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Jeanette, and thank you to everyone for the opportunity to participate in this. Let me first say that FILAT is an intergovernmental organization created in 1992 that has a parity board of directors in which governments and indigenous peoples together seek to find sources of coordination and of dialogue. And in that framework, looking toward the
La primera prioridad era asegurar una participación digna de los pueblos.
We've sought to ensure a dignified and decent participation of the indigenous peoples throughout the pre-summit process. In that regard, taking advantage of the opportunity, the Secretary General appointed me as someone to support the summit to raise awareness of indigenous peoples, to place our peoples on the global stage, and to host over 30 independent dialogues worldwide with over 218 organizations that have agreed on a set of recommendations, but that have also secured opportunities for participation, perhaps not to the extent or the degree that we would aspire to, but we have been present in all of the preparatory phases. So we would issue a call to all of the governments that during the preparatory phases, the activities that are still pending, that they ensure space and opportunities for indigenous peoples. Second, to ensure that we can have clear roles and a clear presence in defining the roadmaps that states are looking at. It's also important to include indigenous peoples' food systems. We've worked together to create a document called We Fala with the support of the FAO. And what we've done there is to set forth the perspectives of the indigenous peoples. This is something we want to take toward the post-summit period. It is a dialogue of knowledge, a dialogue of understanding. And of course, we've involved the Summit Scientific Committee in this context. Now, what do we see? What are the opportunities for collaboration lie? First, we would like to create an indigenous peoples platform that can jointly interact with UN agencies, particularly in the area of food. With FIDA, FAO, the World or the UN Food Program, we do have good relations with all of them, but in a rather disjointed fashion. One of the outcomes of this summit, we believe, is that we should find a means, a mechanism to ensure concerted dialogue toward three goals. One, research on our traditional foods. Second, joint allocation of resources. And if possible, a fund to make available to indigenous peoples for a platform so that we can work together with these agencies in a smooth, coordinated fashion. Toward that, we are requesting frequent meetings into the future. We believe that if we can do these three things, position ourselves as indigenous peoples on the roadmaps of country in the coalitions. Second, the creation of a fund that would prioritize financing to encourage and support food systems. And thirdly, creating a joint platform for indigenous peoples to communicate with UN agencies. I believe then we will be able to take much better advantage of the outcomes of this summit and to continue to keep at the heart of the discussion this tremendously important contribution of the food systems of indigenous peoples with a view toward reducing hunger. Thank you very much to you all. Thank you, Mirna. You have given us 3 very concrete ideas and points of consideration with a view toward these topics, and that is warmly welcome indeed. We are now going to give the floor to Juan Rivera of the National Institute of Public Health of Mexico, who has been unable to join us in person, but we do have a video with his remarks. If we could please use that video. I am very grateful to the United Nations, and its agencies for the invitation to address this very important event, which I will be speaking about food and nutrition. Food and nutrition are the core pillars of health throughout our lives, and we know that malnutrition increases the risk of disease and death and decreases the development of capabilities. Our food system provides sustenance for some 7.9 billion people around the world. Food production has increased and has contributed to the reduction in external poverty, hunger, and malnutrition, but we have been unable to eradicate them. All of our achievements are overshadowed by the increase in the consumption of unhealthy diets that lead to obesity, chronic non-communicable diseases, and premature death. Thus, in Latin America and the Caribbean, we have 42.5 million people who go hungry, 187 million people with food insecurity, 9% of our children under the age of 5 suffer chronic malnutrition, millions of children and women with increased anemia, and the increase in food insecurity due to the pandemic could increase our malnutrition rates even further. In addition, we have obesity and overweight population in 60% of our adults, 30% of children aged 5 to 19, and 7.5% of children under 5. In other words, healthy eating has already become one of the major risk factors for chronic non-communicable diseases, obesity, and chronic illness. We know, in addition, that these diseases increase the risk of complications and death as a result of COVID-19. But in addition to everything, our food systems are contributing to environmental degradation because agriculture occupies almost 40% of our land. It is responsible for 29% of greenhouse gas emissions, uses 70% of the planet's clean water, and excessive use of nitrogen and phosphorus causes eutrophication in dead zones in lakes and coastlines. Land conversion for agriculture is driving mass species to extinction, and nearly 1/3 of food is wasted or lost in the process. In short, our food production system is degrading our planet. It is therefore urgent to create a healthy, sustainable, and fair food system. All human beings have a right to healthy food, and we require a system that is capable of providing sustainable diet and food systems for our entire population. We have already exceeded the limits of several of our planetary systems. The hardest hit are climate change, nitrogen and phosphorus cycles, land conversion, and biodiversity loss. If we do nothing, if we do not act now, if we do not change the way we eat and how we produce our food system will be in a tailspin and will, by 2050, will exceed all planetary boundaries. This would cause tremendous deterioration in health and especially as well in mental health. Changes are required to prevent us from seeing additional backsliding. Changes are a substantive modification, and these include our diet production and our food-friendly mix. That is, changing the way that we produce our food, reducing losses and waste. It means modifying our diet to increase the consumption of vegetables, fruits, legumes, nuts, seeds, and whole grains. It means reducing milk consumption in urban areas in high socioeconomic level dependence, but increasing it in some marginalized urban, rural, indigenous, and Afro-descendant populations that are consuming insufficient amounts. It means a substantive reduction in all groups of added sugars, refined cereal products, and processed meat, and a reduction in red meat, with the exception of some marginalized or very poor communities and areas. We need a comprehensive, multi-systemic package of actions, given the multifactorial nature of malnutrition and the role that diverse systems play in its integration. Its prevention and control require a comprehensive package of actions to transform the food system to achieve the production, distribution, and supply of healthy foods with minimum processing that are produced in a sustainable manner that transforms the food environment and the school system. Currently, the hygienic and oxygenation regulations are needed so that healthy and sustainable food becomes the primary option. The transformation of our healthcare systems also need to take place to ensure the promotion of healthy eating and the prevention and treatment of malnutrition. In addition, information, communication, and education are required to generate in our people the will to adopt healthy and sustainable eating. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Juan, for your presentation. Let us now hear from Leticia Tereguario. She is a senior specialist from UN Women, and she has a very relevant perspective with regard to what women face in terms of the agri-food system context. Leticia, the floor is yours. I would like to begin my remarks by thanking you for inviting UN Women, for allowing us the opportunity to share our experience with other great leaders. It's a pleasure to represent Maria Noivais, our director, and we are here to talk about food systems. So let me begin with some key data that FAO has worked with within Latin America and the Caribbean. We know that this is a food export region, and as a result, we are accountable for 14% of fisheries, livestock, and agricultural food products. Now, prior to the pandemic, it was stated that for 2028, we would double our contribution from 21 to 21%, becoming, as a result, the largest food exporter region. Now, the Latin America and the Caribbean also exports products of $167 billion. This was mentioned by FAO in a variety of different documents, and 87% of these products go to other regions. Now, regionally, the Caribbean, of course, provides 4% of its exports to other regions. More than 96% goes to Central America, Mexico, rather to other markets, and Central America and Mexico only sends 1% to South America and practically 90% to countries outside of the region. We also know that South American countries allocate 14% approximately of its exports to other countries within the region, and the rest goes elsewhere as well. Now, these data are key because they reveal that Latin America and the Caribbean have extensive wealth with regard to food, and this is contrary to the status of food and nutrition from the World Food Program from 2019, which shows that 42.5 per million of individuals face hunger in Latin America and the Caribbean. Now, in South America, the number of individuals who suffer from hunger has increased from 2015 to 2018. It's gone up to 20 0.6. Now, women have a higher likelihood of facing food insecurity when compared to men. Now, this gender divide is present across the board, across in all the continents. Unfortunately, the speaker has frozen. Her connection is poor. Yes, something is wrong with the speaker's connection. I think we have lost her. Her signal is not that strong. Let's give her a few minutes to see if she reconnects. If not, we will continue with the next speaker. Thank you. I will wait for your instructions. That is such a shame that she dropped off the meeting. Why don't we move on to the video now, and we will bring her back online when she is prepared. All right, then, let us move on with Jessica Jacobs' presentation. She's a regional manager of the Green Climate Fund. She has prepared a video. She is currently traveling. That is why she has sent us a video that the interpreters are not privy to. Good morning. My name is Jessica Jacob. I'm the regional coordinator for Latin America and the Caribbean for the Green Climate Fund. First of all, I would like to thank you for inviting us here today. Unfortunately, I am unable to be present in real time, but at least I am here via video to share some key data with you. Now, at the Green Climate Fund, we have a mandate to be the operational entity of the financial mechanism of the UN Framework Convention for the Climate Fund. So we have a mandate to design and fund programs and projects in developing countries using resources from developed nations primarily. Now, we have already approved many projects thus far. I will provide you some data. It's important to point out that we have a very unique added value as an institution because our programming, our country level programming and scheduling is based on the priorities of the countries involving UN NGOs and public and private institutions. And we are carrying these out to have a paradigm shift to make countries more climate change resilient. Now, we try to seek a balance between mitigation and adaptation, obviously. And we have a variety of different accredited entities working with us, more than 100 within the region. We would like to mention ICA, the Inter-American Institute for Agriculture, for Cooperation for Agriculture. This organization was accredited at the last meeting, and we also have a readiness program set up with them. As you know, the GCF has several support mechanisms, and the first is the readiness program, the capacity building arm for government and other entities that are trying to become accredited, entities from the private sector, etc. Now, with regard to AICA specifically, we launched a project. I'm going to list off the countries involved for green recovery post-pandemic. Now, Bolivia, Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, Guatemala, Mexico, Peru, and Uruguay. And there will be a study of the various policies, financing policies, for example, in order to ensure that the countries are able to bounce back following the pandemic. And obviously, this is focused on the agricultural sector. Now, the second arm of our activities involves preparing feasibility studies, providing support for feasibility studies involving environmental social safeguards, community consultations, gender aspects, etc. And this involves $1.1 million per project or per program to carry out the necessary studies to submit what we call a concept note and a funding proposal for specific programs or projects. Now, with regard to agriculture, And in these various sectors, we have funded a variety of different projects. One moment, please. I'm looking up the information.
Perdón.
I apologize for this. I want to provide you with some key data. With regard to natural resources, we have invested $5 million. With regard to soil use, 1.2 billion. With regard to health, nutrition, and water security or water improvement, $1.8 billion. And with regard to the ecosystem service subsector, 1.6 billion. Now, these projects have benefited more than 1.5 million individuals with a variety of different objectives, including climate change mitigation and adaptation. In other words, funding for this sector is one of the 8 priorities that we have identified within the GCF, and we work with a variety of different entities such as ECLAC-FAO, other international and national institutions. For example, in Peru, there was recently another organization accredited. We work with the World Wildlife Fund, others. We have key entities with which and through which we submit projects and work with projects at the national and regional level. Now, the purpose of the fund, the goal of the fund is to ensure that the countries who have handed us this mandate be our partners and partners of the accredited bodies. This is, well, I have 1 minute remaining, so I just would like to now quickly summarize some of the opportunities available with the Green Climate Fund. For example, we have the Readiness Program, which is up to $1 million per country per year. And we have, for example, what we have done with EICA with 8 countries. We also have resources under the Readiness Program for climate change adaptation. And there's a country limit. There's another opportunity for studies, for projects. It's a project preparation facility. And the third key arm is the project funding, project and program funding program for public and private sector. And with that, I will bid you farewell and thank you very much for taking your time to allow me to be here and sharing and listening to me. And I am, of course, available should you require additional information. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jessica, for your remarks. Clearly, you have pointed out a series of funding and opportunities. Let us go back to Leticia, who dropped off for a few moments, but apparently she is back. Leticia, please. Thank you. Thank you, Jeanette. It's a shame that my connection dropped, but let me refer to the data that ECLAC has provided us with regard to food and nutrition security of the indigenous people. Now, obviously, this provides us an opportunity for pause. We know that boys and girls and the indigenous boys and girls are those who face the greatest inequality. So just let me briefly mention that the region has also been facing, as we all know, significant challenges regarding climate change. This is having a direct impact on our food systems and the indigenous people's food systems. And this clearly jeopardizes the sustainability of millions of people around the globe, individuals who primarily depend on what they can grow in their lands. And of course, the industrial systems have an impact on them and are jeopardizing their systems. Now, the pandemic has had grave nutritional challenges for the region, has affected poverty, and this has also resulted in a significant increase in the hunger rate and the food insecurity rates in the region. And once again, her connection is wanting. I guess she continues to have connection issues. Oh, are you back? Hi there. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. We lost you for a few brief moments. Perhaps, Aura, you could turn off your video camera and we will prioritize the audio. Just as I was saying, in Guatemala, for example, UN Women has prioritized working directly with women and indigenous peoples. Also, with regard to public policies, UN Women has assigned a variety of different mechanisms, such as MOUs with the Office of the President of the Republic, specifically with the Secretariat for Food and Nutrition Security of the President's Office. And we continue to provide legal support to set up gender balanced actions, and we have also come up with frameworks for assessing nutrition indicators, and we are working toward gender equity with a cultural relevance, all for the benefit of food security. And the UN system is also consolidating two key actions, for example, the Advisory Council for Indigenous peoples and the other one for women. This will allow us to address such key issues as the ones we're talking about today, and will allow for improving coordination within the UN organizations. And also specifically with regard to the Food Systems Summit and identifying common grounds towards food systems, sustainable and resilient and inclusive food systems in Latin America and the Caribbean, we believe that it is necessary to strengthen our food systems, paying specific attention on how we can boost the resilience of these food systems, specifically when faced with economic, political, climate, and social impacts. This obviously must involve women. We cannot do without women. We must also ensure that the food systems will contribute to closing the gender divide and recognizing the key role that women play in the various levels of the entire food system regarding access and accounting for food contribution, this at all levels. It is also necessary to revisit and redesign regulatory frameworks based on the international human rights standards for women. This is key for transformation. In this regard, regarding transformation, we must also take into consideration that, generally speaking, women have significant challenges. It's more difficult for women to have access to inputs, resources, and land, for example, services and other opportunities and other factors.
Women represent some 50% also of the workers in agriculture in the low and medium income countries, but they only account for 15% of the land owners. It's also frequent that they manage smaller plots of land and have less access to financial services and other resources that are key as compared to men. This is even more complex when we consider that, based on statistics from the ILO, the agricultural sector in the region where informal employment, considering wage earners and self-employed individuals, is 82.6%, where women, children, migrants, and indigenous people make up the vast majority of the population. With that data, it is clear that we need to develop responses to overcome the gender gaps in our food production systems, providing opportunities for policies, programs, and measures that are aimed at strengthening our food security systems, that also allow for a reduction in the gender gap and that ensure equal access to opportunities for men and women. These policies, programs and projects must ensure appropriate resources for women so that they can participate appropriately in the productive systems, so that they can contribute, not only recognizing the leadership role that women play. The speaker again has clipped and the interpreter lost a sentence. We talk about production of foodstuffs, including the distribution of such is key to be able to overcome exclusion and inequality. Furthermore, applying traditional knowledge of women of an ancestral nature, and particularly those of indigenous peoples, as has already been mentioned, is of the utmost importance. From our indigenous people, we must know that this ancestral unique information provides tremendous opportunity for food security and the prevention of many diseases and illnesses, as well as biosecurity. From the interpreter, the sound is intermittent. We're not able to understand fully the speaker. We, she says, need more creative mechanisms to interface traditional knowledge with scientific knowledge, and based on this, we can improve the agro-understanding the world so desperately needs. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown clearly that we all depend on our food systems
para generar, sino incluso han alimentado a países enteros.
and traditional systems have been able to feed entire countries. Given the situation in Latin America and Caribbean and specifically that of indigenous peoples, it is urgent that the international community, national countries establish policies and thresholds that support the work of indigenous people, particularly indigenous women, to protect their food systems. The pandemic is a crisis that is affecting, will continue to affect in coming years, foodstuff production and agriculture. It is therefore urgent to ensure production chains, particularly for the poorest and most vulnerable people, to ensure that we are encouraging the use of traditional production mechanisms and systems, particularly those among indigenous people, women, and youth, so we can strengthen all of these groups, as well as the abilities of indigenous people so that they can manage their own resources. All of this, again, is key. Thank you very much.
De las mujeres y los pueblos indígenas.
Thank you very much for these remarks and for highlighting the importance of the care society, the culture of care that we have discussed here at ECLAC within the context of food systems, and also the important initiatives that UN Women has been taking. To conclude, I would like to give the floor to Efraín Quitania, Regional Specialist in Rural Economy of the ILO, who will be addressing a particularly important topic as well, and that is the topic of rural socio-demographic dynamics. We've asked Efraín, what are the transformations taking place in the region that will influence food production systems in the future, rural populations are, we're seeing urban flight and rural flight and changes, and there are tremendous demographic changes in that regard. So what are the contributions for the contributions of these food systems that are more sustainable, inclusive, and resilient in Latin America and the Caribbean? You have the floor, Efraín. Thank you very much, Janet. First of all, I bring greetings to Alicia Bárcena and to Julio and the different authorities present here, as well as the panelists who are with us here today. I also bring special greetings from the regional director, Mr. Piñeiros. And this type of session reminds me of early 2000 when I was directing a networking project for food security in the Andean countries, specifically in Peru, in a community in the upper Andes, in the area of Huancavelica. And a community leader there said to me To make progress in a sustainable fashion in different fields, there are three key words. In Quechua, he said poco maya, one single thought, hok nawia, one single vision, and huk matia, all together working. And so these efforts certainly, again, everything we've heard here has brought me back to these three words, these three core concepts that rural leader told me back in the early 2000s. But in any case, if we're working in the fields and in the countryside in the 21st century, there are issues, of course. Now, with regard to your first question, let me highlight certain estimates and calculations that have been done by the ILO. One major transformation is that we are experiencing fast-paced urbanization, which really started in the 1950s. The rural world has been transformed in recent years as a result of fast-paced urbanization, and the forecast suggests that this will continue, and in 2050, just 13% of the population will continue to reside in rural areas. The second transformation, as has been noted here, is that fewer young people are in the countryside, in our rural areas, and more senior citizens. We used to see a larger population of 15 to 24 years of age in our rural areas, but we've seen an uptick in senior citizens in these areas. They used to be less than 1% of rural residents in the 1950s, approximately 10% in 2020, and the forecast suggests that that percentage will be over 30% by the end of the century. That means that 1 in 3 people who live in rural areas will be over age 65. Now, before sharing statistics on the third major transformation that we are seeing, I'd like to note that the rural economy is a source of employment for some 52 million people. That is to say, over 18% of people who work in rural areas, both agricultural and non-agricultural rural areas. And if we look at this, it's particularly important for certain countries such as Central America, has been mentioned, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador. In fact, in the case of Guatemala, 1 out of every 2 workers works in a rural area. And in South America, we have Bolivia and Paraguay that stand out in this regard. And this brings me to the third major transformation that we are seeing in the rural areas, and that is the reduction of rural employment as an overall percentage of total employment. What we're seeing, therefore, is that the sector of agriculture in rural areas has gone from 57% in 2012 to just over 52% in 2019. We've also seen that the participation of employment in the non-agricultural sector has grown considerably in recent years, moving from 30% in 2012 to 48% between 2019 and 2020. In this distribution, we can see employment in restaurant, hotels, and others that represent 14% of non-agricultural activities in rural areas. Now, in the context of one of your questions as well that has more to do with the nature of employment in rural areas, what are the core features there? Informal employment is the primary source of employment for inhabitants of rural areas in the region who work in family contexts. Of course, they are by definition all informal, self-employed individuals and salary earners. In our region, 76% of people are informal, and that means they lack basic social protections or social benefits. In the agricultural sector, as has been noted by my colleague, the proportion is even higher, with 85% of people who work are doing so informally in regional and rural agricultural areas. In just sub 65% of other rural workers are informal. Informality in the rural sector also hits women hardest. We can see the case of women, both agricultural and non-agricultural. The rate of informality is greater. Where we have some 92% of women are in those conditions are working informally. Another important facet is that the high level of informality also disproportionately affects young people. We can see the rate of informality is always higher in rural sectors, and particularly for the young people, with some 99%, and the same thing happens for senior citizens. Therefore, from this perspective, from the perspective of the ILO, what are the contributions that we can make to more inclusive, sustainable, and resilient food systems in our region? Based on the institutional mandate of the ILO and our tripartite agreements and the research that we have engaged in, as well as the resolution that was recently approved with regard to a worldwide call to action to recover from the COVID-19 crisis so that it is as sustainable as possible, we believe that the construction of more inclusive, sustainable, and resilient food systems is intimately linked to fostering productive employment in the creation of decent work and sustainable employment in the rural economy, with an accent on women and youth. Toward that end, we have 5 policy approaches. First, encouraging agricultural growth that improves quality of life and food security, as well as productive and decent work for all. This means, for example, fostering labor legislation that recognizes the unique features of work in agricultural sectors. Second, developing economic development and productive transformation for rural development. Toward that end, it is important to ensure health and healthcare and healthy conditions in work, associativity, in linking of production chains, and the business management that respects these structures, improving land ownership and technified irrigation, among other elements that seek to transform employment into green jobs, with a view toward creating digital education, improving education in rural areas, focusing primarily again on women and young people, certification of competencies, increasing rural entrepreneurship, bringing into alignment professional training with productive development and developing technical skills. Fourth, social and protection mechanisms and labor protection. We need to expand Social Security, increasing written contracts and their scope in the rural world, strengthening minimum wages and inspection systems, and to do so in innovative ways. And of course, the ILO is a tripartite organization, and therefore we also need to see coordination, articulation, and greater effort in terms of public policy in rural areas. This includes expanding opportunities for social dialogue, creating discussions between and among different ministries to ensure an accent on labor and greater coordination, again, between and among ministries that very often fail to do so. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I hope to have contributed to these ideas and to your thoughts. Thank you very much, Efraín. Very well, I believe that we've had a broad opportunity to hear the proposals from the different agencies and players from the United Nations, as well as from non-institutional organizations and groups, civil society, academia, and so forth. We believe, of course, that we are certainly in a position so that our executive secretary can wrap up this important event that has brought together so many countries, so many governments, and the agencies and institutions, again, within the scope of the United Nations system, as well as outside the UN system in terms of cooperation and others. So let us now turn to our closing. Alicia, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. It's been truly a pleasure to hear from all of you, those of you who have joined us today, the ministers and other authorities, and the other individuals who speak out on behalf of women, the indigenous peoples, representatives of our sister organizations, the CIAT, UN Women, and of course the Green Fund and the ILO. Thank you. And of course, thank you to Julio Bardege, the Master of Ceremonies with regard to agricultural, livestock sector, fisheries in our region, and of course, ECLAC as well. We are very pleased to be here. And allow me to just point out a few key conclusions based on what I heard. And there are very few of them, only 10, I promise. The first is the importance of having diverse food systems. This is quite a challenge. Not only do we need to go from having very few crops, but we also need to move toward more diversification of our agri-food systems and of the overall food sector, because fisheries is key for our region as well. Secondly, we need to protect biodiversity and enhance agro biodiversity. This is a key issue. We truly need to protect and safeguard our biodiversity and our agro biodiversity. And that brings me to the third issue, which is the importance of water and the importance of water governance systems. Also, fourthly, to prioritize soil and land conservation. We are going beyond the nitrogen and phosphate limits, and many believe that the tropical jungle is a very rich region. And obviously, when we see deforestation there, the soil becomes quite poor, and we know that that region, the tropical jungle, is an area of key soil recycling and nutrient recycling. So it's not just about preserving soil, but preserving the nutritional richness. And also brings me to the importance of and the knowledge, the diversity of the indigenous cultures, and then production. I actually began my career working with the Mayan culture and how they used plants and how they act, not just that, but how they viewed the ecosystems and how they created these harmonious structures within their society, and how plants played a very key role in their existence. And then also the indigenous cultures and people, Mirna, you are absolutely correct. They must play a key role. Let's not forget about the importance of innovation and young entrepreneurs. Efrain just referred to how there are fewer young people living in the rural regions, and that's an issue. And the model, we must have a shift in our model so that we can foster youth participation in the rural region. We know that a lot of people have gone from the countryside to the cities, and we need to revert that so we can be more resilient. And also, it's important to address new technologies, access ensure that their family farmers have access to new technologies. That's why innovation and involving the young people is key. And 7, closing the gender gap. Of course, we need to involve women along every link of the value chain. There's no doubt about that. We need to also boost the capacity of rural and urban women. And I would actually say boosting their access to land, often because of inheritance laws and legislation and paternalistic approach. This has an impact on women's access to land. And also we need to work toward a more structured care economy. I think this is an issue that affects our region, but others. And it's not just a care economy, but a care society that will care for health and the environment, individuals. And this is not just a burden that falls on women. This is something that is within the purview of all members of society. And what about the donor culture? I think all of the national dialogues, in fact, have referred to the donor aspect. The ministers of agriculture, of social development, and other areas have mentioned these aspects, and we all need to take note of what you're doing nationally and locally. I believe that the 8th point, in my opinion, is how we can boost investment and financing, not just to address climate change. Of course, the Green Climate Fund is key, but we also need to ensure that there's more resources for nature-based solutions, and then so that we have more timely, transparent credit available to farmers, microcredit as well. We know how important the microcredit mechanisms are in the coffee corridor in Central America, for example. I would also say that the 9th issue for me is how we can best link the school meal system with local producers, local farmers. I think the partnership we have with the World Food Program is key there. The linkages between education, food, school, essential. And this will foster nutrition endeavors as well. This is my last point. We have to address nutrition and malnutrition. We know that malnutrition has a two-pronged impact and cost for our society. Now, the ILO representative referred to what we can do to foster greater, more formal employment and ensure that precarious employment wanes. Now, this, in fact, has been a magnificent, extremely enriching experience, and we have prepared a statement, a declaration on behalf of all of the funds and programs. I'm sure that you will be receiving this soon. We will distribute this. This is actually a commitment by all of the UN agencies, funds, and programs, because we truly want to take on a commitment with you, with the countries, for the various actors. And we have been convened to buoy up all of our efforts together, and ECLAC, FAO, ILO, UN Women, all of the UN funds, programs, and agencies are committed to our member states, of course, within our sphere of competence. And then we have the various coordination mechanisms, and we're here to ensure the advancement toward the achievement of the SDGs. And we know that that's what you're doing. And we are very much aware of what you require, what you're requesting from us. And we are here to serve our member states and to serve society and people in Latin America and the Caribbean. And we are here to provide our support to the UN Food Systems Summits, because this is essential. This will allow us to have a new perspective, a new approach, this transformative approach that is based on sustainability and inclusion and respect, primarily respect for everything that this region has meant, our ancestors, and what the indigenous cultures have shown us over the years. So thank you to all of you. Thank you, Jeanette. Thank you, Julio. And thank you to everyone who has joined us here today at this event. Truly, a heartfelt thank you goes out to all of you. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Recording stopped.
Thank you, Alicia, and thank you to everyone else.
Muy bien, estupendo. Muchísimas gracias, Alicia.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Alicia.
Gracias.
Janet,
Thank
Janet,
you to everyone who has joined us here today.
¿cómo estás,
Abrazote.
Mirna?
¿Cómo estás, Mirna? Tanto que te queremos por aquí, te queremos por acá.